Welcome along to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. It's the second round of first legs of the round of 16 of the Champions League. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by Marco here, Adrian, Clarke, and Miguel Delaney, our usual European team. We'll get straight into the action. We're going to be covering the four games, obviously, touch on a little bit of Europa League, and then we're going to do our long shots and best bets and props. And shout out to Adrian Clarke, of course, for picking Lazio and under 3.5 goals in that long shot section last week. And all we ask, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and subscribe completely for free, and a 5-star review if you're listening on the podcast would be much appreciated. Inter versus Atletico, PSV versus Dortmund, Porto versus Arsenal, and Napoli versus Barcelona. And we'll start with Inter versus Atletico here. Really decent game. Inter 1.8 favorites to Atletico, 5.6. The draws available at 3.7. Both teams to score no is favored here at 186. Yes, 2.12. The Asian handicap line sees Atletico get a 3/4 of a goal head start at 193, and the total for this game is 2.5. Unders is 175. So, Miguel, set this up for us. You're our Serie A man. I guess you're our European man in general, because I know you're a fan of all the European leagues. So, set these two clubs up for us here and where they're at in terms of maybe a Champions League bid later in the season.
Well, I suppose we are kind of talking about, two great European names, obviously, but because of the modern economy of European football, almost two clubs that, despite their historic stature, are considered not quite underdogs, but kind of upstarts who can maybe undermine the wealthiest and most powerful clubs, both having got to finals in the last decade. Although Atletico's now especially were coming out of that decade, given what they got to the final in 2014 and 2016, only beaten by Real Madrid twice. I'd say Atletico have gone on a considerable evolution since then. And Simeone, who was maybe kind of the great inheritor of the style that actually was first made famous from Inter, Catenaccio, but he has started to move on from that, which led to, I suppose, more how to put it, erratic scoring and conceding rates from Atletico, as well as maybe a slight drop off in the kind of assurance they used to offer in European games. And it's almost like Inter now have inherited that mantle again, especially when you look at their defensive record this season, how they got to the final last season and put it up to City in what was ultimately a narrow final defeat. And it all feeds into a game which it's difficult not to think that it's going to be the most, out of all 8 Champions League ties in this last 16, the closest to a sort of a classic, cautious, tactical game. And this might surprise people given Simeone's recent history, but with that primarily set by Inter, especially when you look at their form in Serie A. So from all that, I am going for. This is one later on, maybe the long shots and kind of the score lines. A lot of people can probably see the way this is lining up, but I'm going Inter and both teams to score no. I think everything feels set up for a low-scoring Inter win here by 1 or 2 goals.
Okay, 296 current the price for Inter, both teams to score no, or effectively Inter to win to 0. Mark, take it away on these two teams, similar to Miguel. And he touched on Atletico Madrid a bit. Looking at their goals in La Liga, they're nearly right up the top sides there. So it shows they have a lot of goals going forward, but you're expecting Inter to ultimately come through here.
Yeah, I think Inter right now, there's a beauty about them because they just know their best team. They know what they're all about. They know how to beat teams. And you look at the side who reached the Champions League final, and you can certainly sort of say, well, they had a relatively easy knockout stage to get to the final, but they competed really well with Man City. And the side that played there, they've lost Edin Dzeko, but they've upgraded with the signing of Marcus Thuram, who's formed a really explosive partnership with Lautaro Martinez in attack. Onana left Man United, but they picked up Jan Sommer, who's a really steady hand between the sticks. And they also picked up Benjamin Pavard, who's been playing at his preferred, centre-half position inside the back three for Inter. They've got 2 excellent options at wing back, but they also got players in reserve to, Simeone normally makes a change around the hour mark to freshen things up down the flanks, and a midfield 3 who can do a bit of everything, really. There's a bit of bite, a bit of balance, and some real kind of top quality ball playing ability between Çalhanoğlu, Barella, and Mkhitaryan, who's enjoying a really sort of fantastic campaign despite his age. So Inter know what they're all about, especially at the San Siro. I think 1.8 on them to win this game is fair enough. Atletico have been scoring goals, have been a lot sort of free and loose, really, domestically. I expect them to revert to type here. There's no reason why they should go to San Siro and try and open up and try and attack Inter when they got a return game in Madrid. They've lost Morata to injury. Looks like he's going to be missing, which kind of breaks up their own partnership with him and Griezmann. I know Llorente started up front at the weekend and scored twice, but I expect probably Depay to step in here instead. But yeah, I do expect Atletico to try and nullify Inter, play on the counter-attack and see what they can pick up. And ultimately, it comes down to Inter are rock solid, regardless of where the game is being taken place. Atletico been pretty much close to flawless at the Metropolitano, but away from home, there have been issues. They failed to win at Celtic, failed to win at Lazio in the group stage. They've only won 4 of 12 away in La Liga. And if you look at their record away at the best teams, they played 7 games against the top half away from home. They've managed only 2 points. They failed to score in 4 of those 7, scored a maximum of 1 goal in 6 of those 7. And if you look at the combined XG figures from those games and take the average, they're averaging just 0.97 XG away against the best teams in La Liga, giving up 1.67. So that's, for me, the tipping point here. So I'm happy to back Inter. I'm just going to squeeze a bit more out of that price by including under 4.5 goals. It takes us to odds against. Very surprised if this game escalates into a shootout. And one thing, the Bet Builder has just opened in terms of booking points. Istvan Kovacs is our referee here, Romanian guy, loves the card, has hit 4 cards or more in 25 of his last 34 European club games. He averages close to 5 in the Champions League. I would expect cards in this game. I would expect a lot of sort of dirty tactics employed, but I think the market is already well over that. I think you have to back about 6 cards or more to get an odds against price, which is not too appealing, but perhaps there's something to build in there with an unders angle too.
Okay, yeah. So we'll lock that in. Adrian, for you, you're not quite as pro Inter as the two guys. So you're leaning maybe towards an unders angle or both teams to score now is probably the pick for you.
I am with them. I mean, on my short list was Inter to Inter nil and Inter and under 3.5, maybe just to risk it a little bit more because the price was quite nice, 2.41 for that. But yeah, in the end, I've just gone for BTTS no because of Inter's solidity. Obviously, clean sheets in 4 of 6 group games. They are just so. The guys have mentioned it. They're just such a solid side. They've only lost 1 of their last 13 games in the Champions League, and that, of course, was the final. So this is a team that know how to navigate matches like this. I guess the only thing that would not worry me is Simeone. You know, he's a very experienced campaigner. You know, if he in the past when he played for a 0-0, he very often got a 0-0. I know that they're not quite as dogged as they used to be, Atletico. But yeah, if there's any doubt there that Atletico might be able to pick up a goalless draw or something like that, then maybe BTTS no is the pick for you at sort of, I think, 1.88. So yeah, I got the same stats really. We know Inter are the stronger side. They should win the game. But I can't see this being a high-scoring affair at all. They're the clean sheet kings, Inter Milan, and I think they're more than good enough to get another one here.
Okay, yeah. So it depends where you want to go. Mark is incidentally Inter under 3.5 goals. That's 2.4. Miguel, Inter, both teams to score no, 296. Let's play it safe and go out of character small, but both teams to score no, 188 just gives us the result not as important. And obviously you can get it completely wrong and right, Adrian, if it's 5-0 or something like that. So 188, we'll lock that in as an official bet. Move on to PSV versus Dortmund. This is another pretty decent game. PSV high flying in the Eredivisie, 2.26. Dortmund 3.35. The draw is 3.8 currently. Both teams to score, yes. More similar to what we've seen this season, 164. The Asian handicap line sees Dortmund get a quarter goal start at just above even money, 202. Goal line here is 2.5, 171 for the over. So, Adrian, we'll go back to you on this one. I mentioned PSV, they're high flying. Dortmund, not so much, but you're expecting just the better league, the better team, maybe perhaps to dig out a result here.
Well, I just can't get those away performances out of my head, really. The ones at Newcastle and the San Siro against Milan, I just thought they were really, really good, Dortmund. I know that they're a relatively inconsistent team and that the performances can be quite erratic, but results have been, by and large, pretty good this season, especially away from home. Maybe they're just better on the road. They've lost just 1 away game in the Bundesliga this season. Lots of draws in there, lots of pretty disappointing draws, but they're a tough side to beat. Borussia Dortmund. They've not conceded very many goals of late, just letting 4 in the last 8 league games. And they handled Milan and Newcastle really, really well, I thought, in those challenging situations. And then, of course, up front, they've got goal threats. Full Krug, and I really like the young English player, Bino Gittins. Is that how you pronounce it? Royce, Sancho, obviously Marlon, Brandt, Makoku's back. Then you've got the double pivot there of Emre Can and Sabitzer. I quite like Dortmund. I think ultimately they are a stronger side than PSV. PSV are flying. They're having a ridiculous season. 62 points from a possible 66 domestically. It's mental. But I can't get this out of my head. I've seen them at Emirates Stadium, and Arsenal wiped the floor with them. They were very, very attacking and left themselves quite open. And in that group stage at home, where you'd expect PSV to be super, super strong, they didn't beat Sevilla and they didn't beat Arsenal. Both those games were draws. So I'm okay to oppose PSV here, just based on what I've said. So you can get Dortmund on the handicap. I'm looking at a quarter goal handicap here. So it needs PSV to win the game for us to lose our money. Dortmund plus a quarter of a goal is 2.02.
Okay, that's currently 2.02. Miguel, I thought Adrian set it up well there. You're getting the form team domestically, PSV, against a little bit inconsistent Dortmund, but you look at that team and maybe the starting lineup they'll put, and you think there's potential here for them to get a big result away from home.
Well, I have to say, I was persuaded by Adrian there. I was leaning towards Dortmund now, given everything, especially with the reminder of that result or that performance against Arsenal. Overall, I think Dortmund will go through relatively comfortably. I suppose just the one thing that makes me kind of stick to quite a high price draw here is just that sense of occasion about a PSV game at home. It'll be one of those where, and of course, because it's become the norm now. Of course, it's no longer a new thing that there's no away goal. So PSV can go for it in that classic Bosch style. Who might want to make a point against one of his many old clubs who I suppose the approach ended up being a bit too adventurous. And I think because of all that, it feeds into maybe PSV seizing it. But for all you look to the difference in form, there is still a chasm between the Dutch league and the German league at this point in where we are in football. And I think that is something that begins to tell in knockout stages. So I just think for this first leg, and given the way the two teams play, given the way Bosch will go for it, there is I think there's capacity for a high-scoring draw, but Dortmund to go through overall. But yeah, I just fancy at least PSV to kind of assert themselves in this match before eventually reality asserts itself right back.
Okay, yeah. So for this first leg, perhaps draw 3.8 currently available for Miguel. And Mark, you're under similar lines here. So I guess a lot of the points the lads make is correct. But in terms of a bet here, eking out a bit of a value, you found one at a pretty decent price here.
Yeah, I found this game particularly tricky in terms of trying to sort of find an angle I really wanted to hang my hat on. PSV can certainly agree with a lot of what Miguel said there, and how they might approach it. Perhaps that kamikaze approach could be their undoing in a home game. Dortmund's got plenty of pace to play on the counter-attack and expose them. But yeah, domestically, and even in the Champions League in Eindhoven, they have been relatively resolute defensively, actually. So yeah, but you do look at the two teams' Champions League journeys, and PSV did have it fairly generous with the group. They had a bit of a pig's ear against Sevilla, despite taking 4 points off them. Required 3 goals, basically the final 5-10 minutes of those two ties to sort of turn the tables there. And I think Sevilla imploded in one of those occasions. And the other games were really sort of tight affairs against Lens. They weren't overly convincing in either. I think they lost the XG battle in both. You compare it with Dortmund's journey, where they, rose after that expected defeat in Paris on match day 1 to really surprise me personally anyway by finishing top of the group. I had them finishing bottom of the pool, and produced those eye-catching wins in Newcastle and Milan, holding PSG on match day 6 when PSG were really kind of needing to win a game there to try and top the pool too, and conceding just 4 goals along the way as well. It's very un-Dortmund-like. So the issue I have with BVB is just can I trust them? And the answer is always no, especially away from home. They've only won 4 times away from home in the Bundesliga, all against teams in 8th and below. Their record against the top 6 is 2 draws and 3 defeats, 13 goals against. And yes, you can say, well, they went away to Leverkusen and stopped them winning. They got a 1-1 draw that day, but anyone who saw that game will have known Dortmund could have been buried 4 or 5-0. It's just football at times. So, even on Saturday, they go away to Wolfsburg, get the early goal, looking command at half-time, then just go off it for a good half hour in the second half, and quite fortunate to end up with a draw. And Terzic wasn't happy with the performance. And I just find them so erratic, so inconsistent, so difficult to pin down that I don't really want to have a strong view in this game. So I've gone for something a bit bigger, which will feature in the long shots section, actually. So perhaps I'll kind of keep it. I'll hold on to it until then, because I won't be having a sort of firm bet in this game, or instead be having a dart at a bigger price.
Okay, yeah, let's lock you in. Well, Adrian made the best case there, I think. Dortmund plus a quarter of a goal, 2.02. We'll lock that in as a bet. Miguel there with a bigger price draw, 3.8 for a first leg. Looks appealing there too as well. Let's move on to Porto versus Arsenal. I know Adrian's dying to get into this game, but I might have to go to Marco Hare first. We'll see. Porto 5.8, Arsenal 173. The draw is 3.95. We have both teams to score. No is favourite here at 187. The Asian handicap line sees Porto get a 3/4 of a goal head start, 2.5. The total here, 186 for the under. So Mark, take it away. Maybe Arsenal in overall sense for the Champions League, and then this game. It's sort of the unknown, a knockout tie, first time in a few years. So what's your overall thoughts on how they're shaping up heading into this game?
Shaping up very well. I'm not really sure what they did in Dubai, but it seems to have worked wonders. Bit of sunshine, bit of rest, recuperation. Obviously helped in January with the winter break as well, and going out of the FA Cup early doors has given the squad an opportunity to freshen up the legs a bit and go again, really. And they've come back with a real bang. And Burnley are absolutely abysmal, but to demolish them in the same way they kind of eviscerated West Ham a week previous, and to be so kind of commanding and win away at Nottingham Forest too deserves a huge amount of praise. They're playing with real purpose, real confidence, and a real ruthless edge as well. So, last year they were thrilling and exciting and surprising. To be in the title race so early. Things unravelled after Christmas with key injuries kind of contributing. There was always a kind of accusation, perhaps there still was a bit of a soft centre about them, but they seem to have tweaked their style over the summer, signing Declan Rice, opting for solidity and control, and just having Gabriel and Saliba fit and available week in, week out makes such a difference with Rice in front of them. They just look a different beast defensively. All the defensive metrics have been super, super strong, and going forward now things are starting to click again. Key players, particularly Saka and Martinelli, are scoring, creating, looking threatening again. Ødegaard too. Even with Gabriel Jesus, Arsenal are looking very good. And let's not forget, this is the same side who neutralised Man City and Liverpool in recent months too. So, their standards have been set very, very high, going forward and defensively too. And there was a time when I thought going to Porto in a knockout game away from home in the first leg was a tricky game. I always fancy Porto as underdogs at home in Europe. But I was quite fond of them in 2 group games against Barca. They performed really well, but fell short in those. But this is a step up in class further. And if you kind of look at the prices, the market is effectively saying this is Arsenal going away to a Brentford or an Everton sort of type, a kind of lower mid-table type team. And it's difficult to disagree with that. Porto aren't the same side as maybe a decade or so ago. They've lost a number of key players. They have replaced them as they always do, but going forward, they don't send the same sort of fear into opposition sides. They've only scored 37 league goals in 22, which is a way away from Benfica and Braga and Sporting. The group they had was quite forgivable, with Shakhtar unable to play at home, Antwerp being completely outclassed, and Barcelona being a basket case. So, I think they will aim to frustrate, aim to intimidate, utilise counter-attacks. That is the Porto way. But I actually think Arsenal deserve to be a little bit shorter. So I'm quite pro-Arsenal at the general prices. But to bolster the odds on offer, you can get odds against by just backing Arsenal to win under 4.5 goals. There's a slight chance the occasion could give Porto an extra leg up. But I think Arsenal, having lost in Lens when the atmosphere was quite intense and possibly a little bit surprising to some of those players, I don't think they'll make the same mistake here. I think they'll be well aware what's lying in wait here. And I think we can possibly see a professional low-scoring victory as they achieved in Sevilla. I think something similar here would be right in keeping with where Arsenal are at right now. So, yeah, I'm quite pro-Arsenal here.
Okay, boost from around 173 to even money exactly. Adrian, take it away and pick up a lot of the points Mark made there.
Yeah, well, all good points, well made. It's nice to hear a bit of praise from the Gooners from Mark. The way I'm coming at it,
long overdue.
He's so reluctant, isn't he? You have to really squeeze it out of him. But when he delivers,
have to provide balance. Have to provide balance normally, guys.
Balance is overrated, right?
There's Arsenal blinkers on this show normally, so it just needs a little bit of balance.
Look, I'm really enjoying the football at the moment. Yeah, I was similar thinking on Porto, not quite what they were. Certainly not compared to the other leading lights in Portuguese football. They're not scoring anywhere near enough goals. It was an easy group. So I think it's a winnable game for Arsenal for sure. The way I want to come at it is half-time, full-time. I want to go Arsenal. And the reason being is, and I only looked this up this morning because I thought, Arsenal keep scoring first. And I've looked it up. 18 away matches in all competitions this season. Arsenal scored first in 14 of those 18 matches. Incredible, really. 7 of the last 8 as well. Arsenal have scored first on the road. In the Champions League, they scored more first half goals than any other side in the competition during that group stage. 12 goals. 12 of the 16 goals in total came before half time. So fast starts have been really, really important for Arsenal. And particularly away from home in these intimidating arenas, the game plan is to obviously be super solid, but own it and to just control that game, front foot, get ourselves the lead and then dictate from there. So yeah, that's the way I'm going. I think that Arsenal are more than capable of scoring in that first half, and then I wouldn't see them relinquishing it. So yeah, it boosted nicely actually. It goes to 2.58 if you're bold enough to think they'll be leading at half time and at the final whistle.
Okay, at 2:58 Arsenal half-time, full-time. You'll find that in our main market section. Miguel, we'll come on to this game in a second, but the Premier League title race, it is shaping up. We haven't really had a three-way title race in the Premier League for a good while, I would say. And it does seem that these three teams are going to be neck and neck right up to maybe 3 or 4 games to go.
Yeah, since 2014, really. And even that, maybe there was a slight sense that Chelsea were just about hanging on there, although, of course, they did probably have the decisive say in the title race and how they stopped Liverpool in that notorious Steven Gerrard game. This is, one thing about that Chelsea side was I suppose it was classically Mourinho. This is a title race between 3 sides who really go for it, as we've seen in Arsenal's recent form. And I think that's what's arguably maybe energized the race a bit, because there had been that sense that Arsenal were just, it's actually amazing. I remember going to one of the games before Christmas, just as they were beginning to dip. And there was that fear that was gripping the place, that they were seeing exactly what they saw in April, but replayed now. And instead, as Adrian's already said, as Mark's already said, the mid-season trip evidently did them the world of good. It was the refresh they needed, I think, both in terms of the condition of the side, but I also think as much as anything psychologically. And that's something you hear from people inside the club now. They just needed that kind of mental break, especially given what happened towards the end of last year. And now it's just been released again. And it's amazing, given that one of the discussions from that period and going right through January was they surely needed a striker to have some sort of say in the title race again, whereas they followed it with their best scoring form for some time. And it's ominous for Porto. The lads have touched on how Porto aren't the club they were a decade ago. And that is summed up by how over the past few months there's been this, battle for the future of the club in terms of presidential election with André Villas-Boas involved. And it does feed into, it's probably not going to be the classic sort of game you would have expected in Porto, even up to 2 or 3 years ago when they knocked out Juve under Sergio Conceição. It doesn't feel like they have that sort of organizational discipline that they did. And I think, as the lads have touched on, and especially if Arsenal get the first goal, we should expect this will be quite a comfortable night for Arsenal. I think, given the price, just the obvious choice is Arsenal to win. They're on form, they'll feed it. And also, let's not forget, this is their first Champions League knockout tie since 2017. That's a long way. So Arteta will have the team really built up for that. I think it's not like the Europa League last year, which almost felt an inconvenience to their title push. This is something that can actually amplify it, and of course, maybe even give them a better chance in the league.
Yeah, definitely. I feel we'll lock in that halftime, full-time shout from Adrian and Miguel and expect Arsenal to get off to that fast start. 258. Mark with the alternative at Arsenal. Under 4.5 goals, exactly even money on the matchbook betting exchange. Let's move on to Napoli versus Barcelona and take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. You can back Napoli 278, Barcelona 274. The draw is 3.6. Both teams to score, yes, heavily favoured in that market at 164. The Asian handicap line is a draw no bet market, and Barcelona ever so slight favourites at 197. The goal line here, 2.5, shade towards the over. Miguel, we'll go back to you just and give us a little bit of to those that tune in and out of La Liga, a little bit of update on what's happening with Barcelona, because people look at that La Liga table and feel like what's going on there, like what's happened in the last 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks.
I mean, really, this is about more than 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks. It's about, I suppose, years of dysfunction. And that's a whole bigger story. In the very short term, though, I think there has been a little bit of a stabilization since Xavi announced that he was leaving at the end of the season. I suppose because, weirdly, despite the fact they're on another manager hunt, it created a bit of clarity again, because there had been so much doubt about his future. I think there is at least debate about Xavi for a manager who did win the league last year. I think that was in not freakish circumstances, but a few things came together that played into Barcelona's hands. It's one. I mean, he had been kind of cast as maybe a potential successor to Pep Guardiola. It doesn't actually quite feel like that, because even the application of the football is quite different. But on the whole, even he has suffered, I think, from what has been almost a disconnect in terms of Barcelona's identity, which is amazing given that they're still producing a raft of young players. But it's difficult not to go back to the summer of 2022 in particular, with that, of course, falling on from so many financial issues over the past few years that led to losing Messi. But rather than kind of just, I think, make the club leaner and more agile and go for a young team, as they did in 2008, as they did in 2003, they kind of went the other direction and decided to get into all these, a lot of people in football thought were surprising financial deals to build a squad that had a lot of players in their mid-20s, early 30s, Lewandowski being the pick. But that does create a top-heavy squad that is fed into this, and I think made things more difficult for Xavi. Now, as I say, they have brought a bit of clarity, and for all their issues, they're in better form than a Napoli side that are facing a considerable hangover from last season. Obviously, Spalletti going as well has been a big factor. Mazzari's, it does feel like it's just one of those situations that, particularly clubs in Serie A, get in just to, a manager they get in just to kind of, I suppose, calm things for a little bit. But it's left them so calm they're in mid-table. And despite Barcelona and his issues, it does feel, just given they've had a little bit of a recovery of late, it feels this is a game where they can actually, they can take the benefit of recent form and not get an easy win, but I would actually say maybe a surprisingly comfortable one given everything. And I'm going for Barca over 1.5 with goals to come in this.
Okay, yeah. Price at 3.35. Adrian, at Barcelona for you as well on the draw no bet market, that is. So you're feeling it. You're pro Barca here.
Definitely pro Barca, yeah. It's almost even money for the draw no bets. You just got a safety net of a drawn game where you can get your stake back. But yeah, look, Napoli are having a terrible season, aren't they? 9th in Serie A. They've lost 7 of their last 15 games since the start of December. And the highest placed team they've beaten at home in Serie A, this is supposed to be a fortress, or it was a fortress. Highest placed team they've beaten in the league at home is 14th place at Udinese. Incredible. Quite the fall, really. And obviously they got lucky with Union Berlin being terrible and Braga, very weak opponents. I think that's why they were able to get through. Real Madrid did score 7 goals against them across the 2 games. So, yeah, I think Barca are more likely to win. They're not the perfect side. They're conceding a few goals, aren't they? I'm not sure about Andreas Christensen in centre mid. But they've got good players and very experienced players. And even though they lost surprisingly against Shakhtar away and Antwerp away, I think their minds will be fully focused on the job here. So yeah, I don't expect them to lose in Naples. So yeah, Barcelona drawn a bet.
Yeah, and the same bet for you, Mark. Again, is how confident would this be? Because obviously these two sides, it's not a classic game that it might have been maybe a couple of years ago, for perhaps. But you're expecting Barca to come through as well.
Yeah, there's just less chaos surrounding Barcelona coming into this for me compared to Napoli. I do think individually and perhaps collectively they do have the edge as well. Picked up positive results against Porto in the group stage. They have only lost 3 times in La Liga and the Champions League all season. Javi is the only major absentee, really, I would suggest, this midweek. So, less noise, really, compared to when Napoli are out under Mazzarri, or Napoli, really, since they won the title. Napoli since May, really, because De Laurentiis just never did what was required of a president of a winning Scudetto side, who I kind of properly remunerating his players and giving them the contracts they deserved and allowing the head coach to leave and sort of making a pig's ear of a job to replace him and doing so again with his successor too. So it's a massive mess. They have massively coughed and spluttered their way through the last couple of months. Their recent home matches against Genoa, Verona, Salernitana, so deeply unconvincing. They've only actually won once against teams in 12th and above in Serie A, home and away, which is a 14-game sample. Shocking stuff. Just 3 clean sheets since September in Serie A. And if you look at their outputs since December against the strongest opposition domestically, they've been nilled and lost to Juventus, to Inter twice, to Roma, Torino, Milan, and they drew 0-0 against Lazio. So that's 0 goals in 7 games against the toughest opponents domestically since December, 6 of which ended in defeat. So, and yeah, the Champions League group was generous, and they made a big pig's ear of that too, because I think Braga and Union coughed up a number of opportunities to make them pay in both games, home and away, against them too. So, kind of fortunate to even be here. So, less noise with Barcelona, so I'll happily have them on the draw no bet.
Yeah, let's lock in Barca, drawn about 197. Concludes our 4 main games. Matchbook Insights or insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all the guys' selections, both now and coming up. Europa League time here. We've one selection here, Adrian, Clarke, and you're using the Bet Builder product to build just goals, because this was 3-2 in the first leg. So, look, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out where your angle is come from here, I think.
Yeah, I'm a company man, aren't I? You know, bringing in the Bet Builder plugs, you know. So, Sparta against Galatasaray. I thought goals over 2.5 and both teams to score. Comes out at 1.86. It was a really good first leg, 3-2 to Galatasaray. We know from the Champions League group stage, Galatasaray only really have one way of playing. They're a very, very positive team. They've scored at least 2 goals in each of their last 10 games in all competitions. And Sparta, who are brilliant at home domestically, have scored at least 2 goals in each of their last 11 games in all competitions. They go for it as well. So, yeah, put it all together. And I think that with the home side having to go for it, Galatasaray knowing only one way, we'll see another shootout.
Okay, yeah, 186. And do check out the Bet Builder products on all Champions League games if you are located in the UK. Let's move on to best long shots. And I touched on this at the start. Adrian Clarke's Lazio on under 3.5 goals. He went against the dizzy heights of Mark O'Hare and Miguel Delaney's opinion and got it spot on, Adrian. So we'll go to Mark. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll go to you first, Mark. And the long shot showing good profit there, incidentally, on the bottom of your screen. Mark, take it away. You touched on this at the start. PSV versus Dortmund.
I could make a case for both teams, really. PSV have been very confident, very assured in Eindhoven. I'm sure they'll get a vociferous backing from their home support in this game. And they're playing a Dortmund team who have proven they can handle tough away trips in Europe, but still have a bit of a flakiness about them too. And the market's definitely expecting goals in this game. I'm not as convinced things will escalate into that sort of high-scoring shootout. First legs, even since the away goals rule has been abolished, have tended to be relatively tight, close, competitive affairs. If you look at the sort of percentage hit rate for overs compared to unders in the first leg since the rule was abolished, it's quite heavily tiered towards unders. So I fancy the draw in this game, but rather than just back the draw at 3.8, if you kind of follow the long-term trends for unders and just include under 2.5 goals alongside the draw, it boosts the price to 5.6. You're basically backing the 0-0 or the 1-1 and ruling out the 2-2 and the 3-3. So, it's a game I haven't got a firm, strong view on either team really to back with confidence. So I'll kind of split it down the middle and back the draw.
Okay, draw and under 2.5 goals, 5.6 for Mark. His long shot of the Champions League week. Adrian, Inter versus Atletico. Correct score again for you.
Yeah, I'm just going to go for Inter 1, Atletico 0, 7.0. I think it's going to be tight. We know that they're the clean sheet kings. Inter Milan haven't lost, 1 in 13 matches in this competition they've lost, and that was the final to Manchester City. No shame in that at all. I think on home turf, Simeone will go back to his sort of more pragmatic style, make it tough, try and make sure the tie's alive for the second leg, and I think they'll manage that, but I don't think they'll manage to get a positive result against this Inter team who look really good. They're Italian football's best team at the moment. Love the settled formation, the settled team. Everyone knows their jobs. Yeah, I think they can grind out 1-0 here.
Okay, Miguel, you wanted that one, so you also have a Arsenal correct score. So talk us through whether you want a split stake for long shots or one or the other. Your call.
I mean, Adrian went for it first. Immediately when I saw Inter Atletico, I just came straight away.
It's what you think, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so obvious. So what should be 2-3 now?
It's route 1. Don't they say it's route 1? Going for this something this obvious.
But partly because maybe just a slightly higher price, and it almost seems as obvious. It's just not quite as all the kind of forces of the game coming together. But Porto 0, Arsenal 2. In fact, I suppose don't want to tempt fate for Arsenal here, but unless Arsenal potentially cut loose and it goes to 3-0 or so, this game does feel set up for, given the form of the teams, given the fact it's a first away game for Arsenal, so they might first away Champions League game in so long that they mightn't quite cut loose the way they have in the Premier League team, and maybe try and keep professional at them, or keep it kind of that tactically constrained in that way. I'm going for a 2-0 to Arsenal.
Okay, currently around 9.0. Best bet time. Adrian Clarke, one bet on the card. If you had to have one, what would you go for?
It's hard. It is hard. I like a few of them this week, but it's the same game. I can't look past this game as being it feels like the clearest in terms of seeing the picture of what's going to happen. I think defenses will certainly be on top. And for that reason, my pick at the top of the show where I said Inter Milan versus Atletico would be both teams to score no at 1.88. That feels the most likely for me. So I'm sticking with it.
Okay, Miguel, similar lines for you, but you want the result as well.
Yeah. I think I'm quite confident in Inter for this one. For all the reasons a lot have said. And also just it's amazing the way it can happen sometimes, given I suppose to a certain degree about 2 years ago, Inter maybe were a club that looked like they were losing their way a little bit, trying to find what they were. And instead, Inzaghi's come in there and really imposed something that works for them, and to the point that they've, at least for the moment, streaked away from the rest of Italy, and almost look, along with Real Madrid, the most formidable force outside the Premier League.
Okay, 296 Inter, both teams to score no. And finally, Mark, you've seen the light. Arsenal and under 4.5 goals is your best bet. So,
well, Arsenal are the strongest pre-match favourites across the board this week in the Champions League, and I think that's fair enough. And as I said, the market is effectively saying this is Arsenal going away to a Brentford or Everton type, really. And if this was Premier League terms, we'd probably be backing Arsenal in that particular scenario. And I'm happy to do so again, the way in which they're playing at the minute. And I'd be surprised if things did sort of jump up and we saw a massively high scoring tie here. So backing under 4.5 goals alongside the Arsenal win gets us to evens. It gets you the 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, or the 2-1 and 3-1 on side, which I think are absolutely the most likely correct scores in this particular game.
Okay, they're the three best bets. We're done. Before we go, a couple of YouTube comments. We don't normally get the chance to get to these. Mark, you don't have to give a strong opinion here, but Macintosh on YouTube wants to know your initial thoughts on that Asian handicap line for Luton plus 2 goals. I think that is Wednesday night at Anfield. They have the day's rest, Liverpool, albeit. But there is a rumour Salah. I haven't looked into that rumour today to see if that was true or not, but I did see it on my Twitter feed last night.
Didn't know about the Salah news, so I would have to know more about that before having a firm opinion. Never really want to oppose Liverpool at Anfield with handicaps. And the way in which I would look at that particular bet is if you're backing Luton plus 2, you're effectively backing Luton to win, draw, or lose by exactly 1 goal to get paid at 2.06, which is still even with those absentees still asking quite a lot, there is a massive chasm between Luton away from Kenilworth Road and Liverpool at Anfield. So yeah, I'd probably say no, but team news dependent.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that solid news now. We'll have to double check that. One final question here from Sean Ireland on YouTube again. Can I ask the guys, what's the most and least impressive stadiums they have visited? I mean, Miguel, you must have shortest longest. I reckon you've thought this question through, surely, at least with the best stadium.
I mean, most of the few that obviously stand out. The Bernabeu, actually, just for not just a sense of history and you're in it and what it is, but actually just the scale of it. And because it's as big as the stadium is, it's quite intense. So there's quite a big drop on the stands. Whereas kind of the Camp Nou, say, which is obviously very impressive, but it's more of a bowl. It doesn't feel quite as intimate. And that's one thing that's always stood out for me with the Bernabeu. I suppose people will always say this, but almost because as a boast because they've been there, but the Bombonera, Boca, just because it is so distinctive. And again, that kind of resonance in football history. The least impressive. Christ. This is very.
You must have thought this through.
I mean, it's all relative, I suppose, in the sense that, I mean, there's any number of, like, say, I've gone to an FA Cup game against a lower league tie, or against a lower, where there's a lower league team involved. And if you're a journalist there, I mean, what you're really considering is, what are the facilities like? Does the Wi-Fi work? So there's a lot of places that can fit into that. I'm trying to think, actually, in terms of what might be. Is there anything that's a bit of a letdown? Weirdly, I mean, one of my, in terms of what comes to mind immediately, one of my least favorite actually types of stadium now is, and this is there was a real strand of these, I think, from around 2005 to 2015, where it felt like a series of clubs, particularly around this kind of mid-tier European or Premier League range, built stadiums that look exactly the same as each other. And I think that's one of the kind of disappointments in modern football in that way, because there was an element of kind of stadiums losing their distinctiveness. And I do think the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was actually a move back towards something the other way, because they thought so much about actually, even though it was extremely modern, having something a bit more, having elements to it that made it stand out. I think that's a very diplomatic answer. I'm sure.
No, I see your point of it though, and in the, like, look, I don't want to name club, like, I know the clubs you're talking about in the Premier League that just their stadiums are a bit they don't do much.
Yeah, this kind of very, clean looking box essentially.
Yeah. Well, I have an answer for least impressed. I went to LA Galaxy Stadium. I wasn't overly impressed with. It's just very open. Didn't like it. We have to put Croke Park and the Aviva, of course, in the top two. Okay, Miguel and Talis, the new Talis Stadium. Please, 4 sides of the ground now.
The Aviva is always incredible until basically you get down to now. I suppose this could be something that makes it stand out as distinctive, but there it suddenly dips at one end because of the kind of those complaints from the residents nearby about sunlight and that, which is obviously fair enough, but it does affect the kind of aesthetic of the stadium, because you're looking around on one side and it's this kind of incredible modern bowl, and then suddenly it gets to or as one of my mates called it, the League of Ireland end. I realize I'd probably say, or at least setting him up for a bit of.
You can name and shame him on Twitter if they come for you there on that one, Miguel. Mark, you've been to a few stadiums, definitely back in the day as well. So give us your most and least if you can.
Yeah, I agree with Miguel about the Bernabeu. I was taken aback by how steep it actually is, towards in the top tier. When you do the stadium tour as well, you kind of get a real good feel for that. It's incredibly steep. I did the Yellow Wall about 10, 12 years ago, which was as impressive as you're led to believe. Just a bog standard Saturday game against Werder Bremen, and it was rocking from about an hour and a half before kickoff. Really a great experience. I would recommend to many people. Least impressive in terms of, I mean, Miguel stole my answer there. I was going to say the endless list of soulless bowls in the Premier League and beyond. Reading, Southampton, stadiums built nowhere near the city centres.
That's a big thing as well. Yeah, that really annoys me about modern stadiums. They're all industrial parks outside.
Yeah, Derby, Stoke, there's a few of them. But in terms of a big one, I'd probably put Stade de France in that category as well. Like in the middle of a horrible area in Paris, industrial estate, is pretty rough, but also more sort of closer to home. West Ham, from the outside, it it looks great, but in terms of a viewing experience, it's horrendous. You're about 6 miles away from the football, so and that's if you're in the sort of the front row. So good luck if you're at the back. But yeah,
on that, when there was all that footage of the West Ham fans leaving early at the Arsenal game, as someone asked me time, just a half-hour walk to the stadium or to the station now. So you're not just far away in terms of watching in the stadium. You're far away from everything once you leave as well.
Yeah, and then trying to get out of Stratford as well is an absolute nightmare too. So yeah.
Cork has that a bit with Parky Queeve and look, League of Ireland stadiums. But as I touched on there, Tala being 4 sides, joking aside, it was great seeing the resurgence, and I'm predicting a resurgence of the League of Ireland this season, Mark. There is already ongoing, I would say.
I saw it start of the weekend. I'll give a shout out to the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. I mean, predominantly a rugby stadium, obviously, but that does generate a hell of an atmosphere when the roof's on. So, and in terms of a viewing experience for a travelling supporter, like, you can't get any better. Off the train, you're in the city centre, the stadium is in front of you, countless bars, restaurants, like, it's just everything is right there for you. So just don't be in a rush to get back on a train after the game, because you'll be waiting a few hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, that was a great segment. We'll have to include that as a podcast maybe during the summer. But thanks to Mark, Miguel and Adrian. Mark and Adrian and myself will be back on Thursday to preview the weekend's football action, and then we'll be back Monday week for the second legs of the round of 16 Champions League ties. Enjoy the Champions League this week, and we'll chat to you on Thursday. Bye-bye.